Meguid, and he's going to talk about his book, Great Joys, Great Sorrows, Immigrant's Journey Through Surgical Residency. How are you, sir? And it's thank you, doctor, for stopping by.
I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking. How are you?
Good, fantastic. So, as part four of your surgeon's tale, what role does this book play in the overall narrative?
Um, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Could you
Oh,
speak
as
up?
part four of Surgeon's Tale, what role does this book play in the overall narrative?
Uh, this is my uh, recollection of my residency coming to the United States as one of the foreign medical graduates, which are 30% of medical faculty in the United States are foreign trained. And I came here as a resident and trained at Peter Bent Brigham Hospital in Boston. And I was in the surgical residency program, which was a very demanding, very hard-working 36-hour weekend, 110-hour week. Fortunately, that kind of training is no longer tolerated.
And I want to do a follow up to that.
Yeah,
So you said, okay, 110-hour week.
yeah.
So how many hours? So I had to do the math in my brain. How many hours did you really have off a week? Just sleep.
You just sleep, period. You go home and you crash, and literally at 8 in the evening, and then you'd be up at around 5 to go back to work at 6 in the morning.
And that has stopped. They don't do those type of
No,
training.
no. Now both Mass General and Brigham, which have become combined as one, have a union for the residents, and their hours are limited. And legally, by statute, they're not allowed to work more than 70 hours a week.
Okay, so when did that change? When did they finally put that into practice?
Oh, back in I would say in the late 1990s or so,
Wow,
around
that's
that time.
not too far along. I mean,
No, no.
and that saved a lot of people from that pain. How did your experience in America's medical field differ from that in London?
Ah, I love that question because I went to medical school in London, and it is steeped, British training is steeped in hierarchy. So that if you saw your boss making a mistake, you really didn't want to step out of line and tell him, hey, that's not the way to do it. You might create a problem. So there was a hierarchy, there was tradition, this is how we always do it, and there was formality. Whereas in America, it was competence, endurance, uh, the work was faster, there was competition, there was ambition in there, innovation, and it all that taught me resilience.
So, do you think it's because of the pay grade? Let's go. I know this is not, I'm going to ask questions that might not be in the book, but think about how much more a doctor makes in the United States than in England. What do you feel? Is it because of the universal health care that doctors make a lot more money in the United States, and they think that's why the training's different in certain aspects in the expectation of investment? How
Yes,
in
yes.
America they invest in doctors, it
Yes.
doesn't sound like in England they do.
Well, the problem in first of all, in America, we are rewarded for procedures we do. So there's an incentive to do procedures. And I came to Boston at the time that hip joints were being introduced. So there was a great incentive to do hip joints for hip pain in elderly folks, and that was well rewarded by the insurance companies. In England, on the other hand, that did not exist at the time I came here. It gradually drifted over there. And since most doctors who've trained there have to go into the National Health Service, the remuneration is much less than there is in the United States.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Ethics are a major part of the medical field. What are some of the most important ethical dilemmas you faced and how did you overcome them?
Ethics is not does not occur when there's a clear choice. It occurs when there is both an emotional and a moral component to the dilemma you're facing.
Right.
It arises from uncertainty. When you're faced with I'm basically an abdominal surgeon, so when I was faced with issues inside the abdomen that were not anticipated or expected, you have to decide this is not the time for ego, but this is a time for humility. You have to think of the patient. The patient comes first. What is the best thing you can do as a surgeon for this patient in this situation to help that patient uh, uh, get along in life? After all, that patient has a family who loves them, who cares for them. They are trusting you and they have invested their confidence in you. So you have to do the very best for them.
So let's talk the ego. How does the ego get away with not providing the best treatment? You think ego would provide the best treatment. I'm just thinking.
No, no, ego is macho. You know, I'm the boss. I'm going to do this, and you're going to have to take it whether you like it or not. That is ego. But there is no room and there's no role of ego in surgery because
Yes,
you're
because
dealing with
it's
human
life and
beings.
death.
Yes, and you're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with somebody who could be your brother, your mother, your father. You're dealing with another human being.
I couldn't imagine being a surgeon because making one little mistake could cause to lose a life or being able to walk or do all those specific things. The pressure on doctors that they don't talk about must be extreme.
Yes, it is. And you know who pays most for of that emotional toll is the family, because you go home, you become an introvert. You don't talk about. It's very similar to people going to war and coming back. I would ask my family, "What did you do in the war?" and they wouldn't tell you anything. And so we don't talk about what we do when we go home. We sort of try to regain our humanity by being with our family and our colleagues and friends.
How do you find compassion during hardship?
That's a wonderful question. Compassion is not a choice. When exhaustion, fatigue, or grief set in, you have to remember that the patient has a family. They have expectations of you as a surgeon. They have confidence in you. And even when emotions grow heavy, and uh, empathy was my way of dealing with humanity. Compassion is not a weakness, but it's a very strength that allows one to endure and to help heal a patient.
What role does endurance play during this period of your life?
It's everything in residency.
I'm sure.
To to endure, there's both emotional and moral endurance. Continuing to care even when the world feels it's overwhelming. You have an overwhelming situation at hand. The true strength of endurance is not the absence of fatigue, but it is the ability to keep going in spite of fatigue.
Mm. So, confidentiality is very important in the medical field. How do you find balance while writing about your experience and respecting the privacy of your patients and colleagues?
That's a great question. Um, there are historical names that I cannot change. Those were the gurus, the giants, the people that we looked up to, the people who trained us. I can't change their names. But certainly, and similarly, my colleagues, I cannot change their names because they existed. We worked together. But certainly, When you write about these things, you change patients' names, identity, their destination, where they came from. Frequently, a patient is a compilation of several patients in whom an experience was similar.
So you're writing about residency. So
Yeah.
this has to be to look back at that time where you had not a lot of knowledge of in practice. What were the things that were the most difficult in residency that you could handle? That was the challenge before you went on your own.
I think the greatest one I found was overcoming or coming to terms with grief. Inevitable when you're training and you're training in these high powered institutions where they tackle very complex problems, invariably patients are lost. And particularly when I was at the Children's Hospital in Boston, we lost some children, and it was very difficult to deal with the grief and to commiserate with the family and to show compassion and to try and learn from mistakes that were made and to help patients along, especially the family, to deal with this tremendous loss. And you don't really overcome this grief. We say in surgery that every surgeon has his own private little cemetery. And when a patient is lost, you sort of in your mind, you bury that patient in your private cemetery. And from time to time, you go to that cemetery and you visit them and you pay tribute to them and you remember them.
Yeah. That's but I couldn't imagine losing somebody, seeing death in your face for the first time. How attached did it, how did you did you ever stop being attached to your patients after you saw your first death that you were involved with? That
Well,
you got
yeah,
that, built that relationship,
yeah,
meeting that person,
yeah,
finally the surgery happened and then they passed on.
yes. We're not trained during medical school to deal with death or to deal with failure. We're only trained with success and advancement.
Oh,
So, dealing with the first death is a really emotional roller coaster. And there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of introspection as to why it happened. And we have something called mortality and morbidity meetings, where every week we review all the operations done and the outcome of every patient, and we particularly focus on deaths to learn what mistakes were made and how could it be avoided in order not to repeat that mistake.
wow. I mean, repeating that mistake in so many ways and mourning for that person. How much did a certain death occur in residency that affected you on your day-to-day operations? Like of even a little bit of fear in your mind
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah. Well, I think every surgeon goes into an operation with a certain degree of trepidation. We've done this operation many times before, but the patient is a human being. It's not a machine, and they respond to the stress of the operation and to what we're trying to do to help them differently. They respond to anesthesia differently. We are a whole team. It's not just one person, and I have witnessed errors being made in front of my eyes, which occurred due to mislabeling of drugs. In fact, you know, which is not in the book, but I will tell you, I had surgery some time ago, and I was given the wrong drug, and my heart stopped, and I was brought back.
Oh my.
So I lived that life of seeing the light and being pulled back into life. And that comes about from errors being made. because of the pressure under which we all work.
Yeah, because that pressure can be very, very. I can't even imagine in so many ways. What other stresses would you say residency? If we can paint a picture to look at residency, especially for people who consider being doctors, we're going to get rid of the hours. Even 70 hours a week is still a lot for a human being. Do you
Yes.
believe 70 hours a week is really good for your health to work that many hours? Let's just get rid of the 110 and go to
All
70.
right. Well, here's the thing. If you're going to train people, it's whether you're going to train them to fly a sophisticated plane or to treat human beings, they need to have a consistency of seeing that patient through from beginning to end. And there are no time limits to that. If one breaks it up, then there is a discontinuation of training, and that in itself creates its own set of problems. So I think 70 hours, I imagine, is doable. My son is a surgeon. He trained under that 70-hour system, and I think he is doing fine.
How about once you get out of residency? How many hours a week did you work?
Uh, More hours than I dare confess, because your patient then becomes yours, and you have to take care of them. You see
Yeah.
them in the morning before surgery, you see them during the day, you see them after, you see their family. Uh, you have outpatients, you have your clinics, you have your office hours. Um, and what we say is the best thing that a surgeon can have is a wife who is not a nagging person.
I think anybody who, because the
Because of
stress
the
is
stress.
unreal when you're
Yes,
in a high pressure position
yes,
compared to something you go to work in front of a desk, go home, live your life, or a job that just really doesn't have that stress. I don't know how many of those jobs are less. I think more and more jobs are going to become more and more stressful in the next 10 to 20 years. So I don't think anyone's going to be away from stress in work unless they're working, a very menial job
yeah.
because it's
But it's
it,
not it's not the stress itself, it's how you cope with the stress. And I think exercise is a wonderful thing. I used to meditate.
mm,
Meditation is a wonderful way to decompress. Um, I used to sometimes, and in my book, I say I wish I was an alcoholic. I wish I could drink because I couldn't drink. I just don't
right.
take alcohol very well. So I would say, gosh, I wish I could just bury my sorrow in a glass of this or that. But
Uh-huh.
that obviously is not the answer.
What
It's not the
joy?
healthy answer.
So tell me about the joy you got from residency. We
Oh,
talked about a lot of the
yeah,
challenges. Let's talk about some
yeah,
joy. Like give me an example in my business, me
yeah,
getting to interview people as part of my agency, getting to have that interview, to own a radio show, to be able to interview all these amazing people every day. That brings me joy. That kind of takes away from some of the day-to-day operations people don't want to know about running an agency where it's not that fun. This is something
yes.
where you light up. You start to feel that energy and that excitement. That is where you have a purpose. So, what was the joy in medicine, especially as a resident?
Well, the joy was the ability to perform an operation well, the ability to see a patient have a problem that you could fix, to see that the patient healed and was able to go home. You got a very positive energy from doing something technically correct. You got great joy from seeing patients uh, healthy and going home.
Yeah. This
That's a
so
great,
I see
great joy.
I felt that same joy as a teacher, especially a one-on-one tutor. So I had a tutoring
Yes,
business at one point. I was a teacher, but when you get to do something that you've made a huge difference in that person's life, it is so rewarding. It's
yes,
an all-time high. I guess it's an all-time
right.
high of being in front of a crowd. There are only certain professions that have purpose and meaning. But there's everyone has to understand that purpose is not an everyday thing. It's not something that's going at times you're just not going to want to get up. You're going to go through those things. but most of the time there's something that makes you excited and all that. And it's too bad that people in medicine can't practice forever. Some
Right,
professions you can practice till you die.
right.
Medicine, you can't because of that life death issue. Maybe that'll change someday where a doctor like yourself would never have to retire if the surgeon was robotic and it was your knowledge and experience versus dexterity in your 90s and 100s. I don't know that this
Yes.
could change the way we look at medicine in the next 20 years. That's something.
But I
Another
think,
joy. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and one of the biggest joys I had was the positive energy that you mentioned. In is a liberating power of compassion and humility in healing patients.
Right. That's the passion I get in getting to learn from people. That's the
Yes.
passion I get from being able to figure things out and learn more. Learning is one of the greatest experiences in the world. And I'm
Right.
sure in your profession,
Yes.
learning, because
Yes.
ultimately it's a little different now with what a resident has at its fingertips compared to what you had at your fingertips.
Right. But we were in the era before CAT scans and PET scans and all these ways or interventional radiology and so on and so forth. We were, I think, looking back, we were practicing in the dark ages.
Oh my gosh. But you never know. It was rolling the dice, right, in specific aspects for sure. So what role did your childhood in Egypt and Germany play in your adulthood?
Uh, that was really what I would classify, and I discuss that in my book, as the influence of my childhood neglect or abuse or complex PTSD on my adult residency. When I was 4, my parents sort of abandoned me.
Oh my gosh.
And I had to live with a maternal grandmother in post war Germany, which was very hard.
Wow.
But but if you stop and put yourself, which I did, in their position and see what they had to deal with, they had gone through World War One, they had gone through the Depression, they had gone through World War Two, they had survived, and then in the late 60s they suddenly had a young 4-year-old kid to take care of. That's how you learn compassion. You begin to learn, well, the other person on the other side who's doing their very best for you is in fact helping you. And then when I went to the Children's Hospital in Boston, my surgical rotation through that, I had children who were the same age that I had been when I went through all these difficult periods. And that was when it was so difficult to practice. And in my book, Great Joys, Great Sorrows, I do mention some of these children and how I had to live with them and how I, in fact, got very attached to them, wanting to help them.
Wow. It must be an amazing thing to work at a children's hospital
It is
versus
indeed.
working at an adult hospital where some of the people put themselves in this position versus a children's hospital where it's not in their control at all, them getting into the hospital with their illnesses or disease or potentially cancer or other things that you had to go through. I mean, again, an amazing when did you retire from medicine?
I retired after 35 years of very fruitful practice. There
And
comes a period in your time, in your life, when which you sort of touched on it, when technology starts to overtake you, and you as a surgeon own your own education. You have to keep up to date with everything around you. And in fact, we have to recertify our license, our medical license, every so many years. It differs in different states. In order to keep up to snuff in your practice.
wow.
And there comes a time when you find that you just want to spend a little bit more time at home, maybe go fishing, maybe play a round of
So
golf or something like
that's why
this.
you wrote 4 books, right? Because guess what? You got too bored. See, this is where the retirement I think retirement's the lie in so many aspects. Someone who has to get out of that profession, where can they go next? An author is probably one of those big things that they can do. They can write. You see the marketing of your book and going out there and doing interviews. You still have a full-time job in retirement, and it's fulfilling because you get to tell stories. So
Yes,
that's the thing. Always have a plan if there is a
yes,
retirement. There's never going to be a
absolutely.
retirement for me. No way.
No,
As an entrepreneur, I'm never retiring because
you're absolutely right.
this is what I'm 53 right now, and there's no and I'm going to go, and I'm hoping technology and medicine allows people in Gen X age to probably live to their 120s or 130s or more. We're seeing it, especially with the evolution of AI. Do you agree with me that we're going
Yes,
to?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
But
And
that
see,
means
if
you got
you
to keep yourself, your mind sharp
physically
and keep
fit,
going, and physically fit
physically
too.
fit, yes, and mentally sharp. And I think all the things we touched on, namely changing careers and relearning things and re-challenging yourself on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be big things, but you have to keep your mind supple. Now,
Well,
you mentioned your age. I will tell you my age. I'm 82. And I just, if this is retirement, then it's heaven. Okay.
I'm glad for you. So at 82, but see, your mind is sharp. And what do you think is the reason you're able to keep your mind sharp? This is a great question for a final question.
Because I went to residency at the Harvard Hospital.
Okay. All right. Where can we purchase your book and learn more about you? Where can we get the book?
Oh, the same person who just knocked on my door, the Amazon people, they have the book, and it's freely available, and I'm glad it's doing well. People love reading it. You know why? Because every patient is a story.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Michael, for coming by. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you for your interview. I love being with you.
I did too.